Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with me.
Glad to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at friendship.
Oh, cool.
And I thought this was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
We're actually going to be taking a look at an IELTS podcast.
Okay.
So IELTS is the International English Language Testing System.
Right.
And it's something that people take if they need to prove their English proficiency for work or immigration or study.
Gotcha.
And so this podcast episode is all about how to talk about friends.
Okay.
Which, on the surface, you might be thinking like, oh, well, I know how to talk about my friends.
Right.
But what was really interesting to me is they give a lot of tips about like how to structure what you're saying and how to use more descriptive vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And so while this is geared toward test takers,
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of really good information in here for like all of us who just want to maybe communicate a little bit better.
You like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that they talk about is that often like a test taker, when they're asked about their friends, they'll just say something like, oh, my friends make me happy.
Right.
But what they suggest is saying something more along the lines of like, my friends contribute significantly to my happiness.
Ooh.
And I don't know if you've noticed this, but just that subtle shift in the language, it really kind of makes you think about like, okay, what is it about my friends that really makes me happy?
It sounds much more thoughtful for sure.
Yeah, it just makes you sound more sophisticated and like
Sure.
you've really thought about this topic.
It does, yeah.
And then another thing that they talk about is using specific examples.
Okay.
So instead of just saying, oh, we like to go out together,
Right.
they give examples of like, we go for coffee every Saturday or we like to have game nights.
Oh, nice.
So what are some things that come to mind when you think about like things you do with your friends? Like what are some specific examples?
Definitely just like hanging out at cafes is always fun.
Yeah.
Go to see movies, playing sports sometime.
Mm-hmm.
I even like having picnics in the park.
Yeah, that's nice.
Things like that,
Yeah.
just to kind of get out.
Those are all good examples.
Yeah.
So another thing that they talk about is like this kind of age-old question of, do you prefer having one close friend or a group of friends?
Oh, that's a good question.
And
I think that's something everybody thinks about.
yeah,
Yeah.
in a role play in the podcast, the host Gwen expresses her preference for having one very close confidant.
Interesting.
And she really emphasizes like the trust and deep understanding that you have with that person.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other hand, they acknowledge that a group of friends can also be really beneficial.
Yeah.
Because you get exposed to different perspectives and you have more opportunities for social gatherings.
Right. It's more like a party atmosphere sometimes.
Yeah. So what do you think?
I think both are important, honestly.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have a close friend who you can really trust and confide in, but it's also good to have a group of friends to just have fun with.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, to get different perspectives.
Yeah, it's like they each kind of fulfill a different need that we have.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's not really like a one versus the other.
Right. It doesn't have to be.
It can be like both.
Yeah.
So I guess a question for our listeners would be like,
Yeah.
do you identify more with like that one close friend, or do you prefer having a group?
That is a good question.
Yeah, so think about that.
Yeah. I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about some really interesting things so far.
Yeah, we have.
And in our next part, we're going to get into some more details about like,
Okay.
how to maintain these friendships and things like that.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. I'm excited. It's funny, thinking about friendship, it just seems so simple on the surface.
Right.
But then when you really start to break it down,
Yeah.
it's like, wow, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. There's so many different aspects to it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as we get older,
Yeah.
what we look for in a friend changes.
Oh, absolutely. Like our priorities change, our experiences shape us, and ideally our friendships should reflect that growth, right?
Totally.
Like what I need from my friends now is so different from what I needed like when I was in college.
Right. And I think this IELTS podcast, they bring up a really good point about that.
Oh, yeah.
Like the importance of actually prioritizing friendships.
Yeah.
Even when we get busy.
Yeah, because it's so easy to just let those things kind of slip away.
Yeah, when work gets crazy or, family obligations come up.
Right.
It's like friendships are often the first thing to go.
Mm.
And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I agree.
Because those connections are so important for our well-being.
Gwen, the host, she mentions trying to meet up with friends at least once a week.
Oh, wow.
Even if she's super busy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to do that more often.
That's a good goal.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that friendships, they need nurturing.
Yeah, they do.
It's not a thing that you can just like take for granted.
Set it and forget it.
Right, exactly. You got to actually
Yeah.
put in the effort.
Yeah, and it's not just about, like, seeing each other all the time either.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the quality of that time together.
Exactly.
Like, really making an effort to connect on a deeper level.
Yeah, like actually having meaningful conversations
Right.
and doing things together that you both enjoy.
Right. It's about building those shared experiences and
Yeah.
memories.
Right.
So you're not just, like, checking in with each other.
Yeah.
You're actually, like, living life together,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And that brings us to another point that the podcast made, which is that
Okay.
friends are like a second family.
Oh, for sure.
Like, they play such an important role in our well-being.
They really do.
Like, think about it. They
Yeah.
give us a sense of belonging, a space to be ourselves
Yeah.
without judgment,
Yeah. Just total acceptance.
and a network to help us through those tough times.
Right. It's that feeling of being seen and understood.
Yeah.
I think that's so crucial for our emotional health.
Yeah, it's so validating to know that someone gets you.
Right? Even when you don't get yourself.
Exactly.
And it's not just about the emotional support either.
Right.
True friends, they challenge us, they push us to grow,
Mhm.
and they expose us to new perspectives.
That's a really important point that I think sometimes gets overlooked
Yeah.
because it can be uncomfortable
It can be.
to have someone challenge your beliefs or your way of doing things.
Yeah, but that's how we learn and grow.
Exactly.
Like, a true friend, they're not just going to tell you what you want to hear,
Right. They're going to be honest with you,
even if it's hard to hear.
even if it hurts a little bit.
Right, because they want what's best for you.
And they want to see you reach your full potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're invested in your growth
Mhm.
as much as you are.
Okay, so speaking of challenges, I was really intrigued by something that Leo, the other host, asked Gwen. He was like, do you think you'll stay friends with your current friends in the future?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, that kind of got me thinking.
Yeah, it's like that elephant in the room. You
Right,
know,
and like, it's this bittersweet reality of friendship that even though we hope these bonds will last forever, life doesn't always work out that way.
Right. Things change, people move.
Priorities shift.
Yeah.
And sometimes those friendships just naturally fade.
Yeah. It's sad, but it's true.
What was Gwen's response to that?
Well, she said that she definitely wants to maintain those close bonds.
Yeah, okay.
But she also acknowledged that it takes effort.
Mhm.
Like, you have to be intentional about staying in touch.
Yeah.
Making time for each other.
And that's something that I've definitely struggled with.
Yeah, me too.
Like, as I've gotten older and busier,
Yeah,
it's just harder to find that time
it is.
and to make those connections a priority.
Yeah, but it's so worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
those are the relationships that really matter, you know?
They're the ones that enrich our lives and make us feel whole.
Exactly. And I think this whole conversation has really highlighted that.
Yeah, it's been really insightful.
It has.
So we've been talking a lot about how important it is to maintain those friendships.
Yeah.
But what happens when they just kind of naturally fade away?
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's something that a lot of us experience at some point in our lives.
It is. It's part of life, you know?
Yeah.
People grow and change.
And sometimes they grow apart.
Yeah. And that's okay.
It's not always a bad thing.
Right? Sometimes it's just a natural evolution of two individuals on their own paths.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember that because it's easy to feel like you've done something wrong.
Right, or like you've failed in some way.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
sometimes it's just not meant to be.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. So how do we know when it's time to let go?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know that there's an easy answer.
Right.
But I think it's important to be honest with ourselves and to really assess whether the friendship is still serving us.
Right.
And if it's not,
Then it might be time to move on.
yeah,
And that can be really hard,
it can be.
especially if it's a friendship that's been the big part of your life for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's necessary
Yeah.
to create space for new connections.
And to allow ourselves to grow and evolve.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we connect this back to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
I think what we're really talking about here
Yeah.
is the fluidity of friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some bonds will last a lifetime,
Right.
but others will have a season.
Yeah. And that's okay.
It is. And I think the key is to appreciate all of them
Mm-hmm.
for what they are.
Yeah. For the lessons they teach us
Right. And for the joy they bring us.
and for the people they help us become.
Exactly.
Wow. So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
And I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
Yeah. There's so much more to explore.
Yeah, there is.
But I think we've touched on some really important points, you
Yeah.
know, about the nature of friendship and its importance in our lives.
Absolutely.
And I hope our listeners have found it as insightful as we have.
Me too. It's funny how we started out talking about how to ace an English test.
Right.
But we really ended up exploring, like, what it truly means to be a friend.
Totally.
Like how those relationships make us who we are.
Yeah.
And how they change over time.
And it's that change that really got me thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about how friendships satisfy that deep need for connection.
Right. Like that need, that's probably been with us since like the dawn of time.
Exactly.
And we also saw how friends give us more than just a shoulder to cry on.
Oh, yeah.
They challenge us to grow, push us out of our comfort zones.
Help us become better versions of ourselves.
Exactly.
It's like having a personal cheer squad.
Yeah, but a cheer squad that's not afraid to call you out when you're messing up.
Right, exactly.
But then there's that other side of it.
Yeah.
Like the fact that friendships can change.
Sometimes they just fade away.
Yeah, even when we try our best to hold on.
It's tough.
It is.
But I think it's something we all got to learn to deal with at some point.
That brings us back to that question from the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
How do we take care of these important friendships?
Especially when life keeps throwing us curveballs.
Exactly. Like, how do we make sure they don't slip away?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is, and there's no magic answer.
Right.
But I think being present and mindful is a good start.
Yeah.
Like actually making time for those connections.
Treat them like they matter.
Exactly, because they do.
And I think another takeaway is to be grateful.
For all the different kinds of friendships we have.
Exactly.
Like the ones that make us laugh, the ones that challenge us.
The ones that make us feel seen.
Yeah, and even the ones that maybe have run their course.
Because they all taught us something.
Yeah.
And they all helped shape who we are today.
This deep dive has been such a cool journey.
It really has.
We started with test tips.
Right.
But we ended up discovering so much more.
About the beauty and complexity of friendship.
And I hope that you listening out there have learned a thing or two as well.
Me too.
So the next time you're with your friends,
Yeah.
take a moment to appreciate those connections.
Cherish those moments.
And remember that friendship is one of life's greatest gifts.
Couldn't said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into friendship.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll catch you next time.